doing the work and start asking these same questions in a safe group of other men or in community or whatever it is, but to start asking the questions and start showing up and start doing the work to be that example of what it should be. And
today on the show, we've got Corey Baum, the founder of the Evolved Men Project and the host of the Evolved Men podcast. Corey's work is all about helping men move beyond doing life alone, beyond numbing out, pretending they're fine, and carrying everything by themselves. After hitting his own breaking point and rebuilding from the inside out, he's now on a mission to guide men into self-leadership, emotional courage, and real brotherhood through coaching, community, and deep conversations. He's helping men lead themselves, their families, and their relationships with more integrity and intention. Corey, I'm excited for this conversation. Welcome to the show.
hey, thanks, Anita. I appreciate it. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm really excited for this because I think it's a subject that can do with a lot more open conversations. Definitely.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think the world's not having enough of them. So the more that we can have, the better.
Definitely. And so with that said, what is one of the most courageous things that you have done?
Oh, man. I got to pick one.
Unfortunately. But
Yeah.
hey, I'm happy to go with a couple.
Okay. I think for me, as I think about it, it would probably be for me stepping into this arena of men's work in general, right? And it's an entire paradigm shift for me, right? There was no, it's not something that I would have seen myself 10 years ago getting into, right? So it really went from, I've got a background in technology, is really my previous business. And so going from technology to supporting men in these sort of spaces, right? It's stepping into that. It's not only because the nicest thing about it is not only I have to do the work first to a certain extent, right? And so, when we talk about courage and stepping into it and doing it, like, it's not like I can just step into it and kind of fake it. Like, I have to kind of do the steps all along the way in order to show up and be kind of that image and that representation and to feel good about it, right? To have integrity. And so I think at every step along the way, it's taken, for me, it feels like it's taken an immense amount of courage at many different times to step into whatever it might be at the moment. So, yeah.
Yes. And that is definitely courageous because it's out of the comfort zone. It's dealing with the unknown as well. And men are not happy or don't like to show their emotions. And this is stuff that is really getting beneath the surface. It's really understanding that we can be whatever we want to be, or we can talk about things without feeling embarrassed. So, yeah, I really look forward to the conversation we're going to have.
Yeah, me too.
Yes. So, can you share the story of how the Evolved Men project started and what was the breaking down before this work really begun?
Yeah, absolutely. It's something I've been thinking a little bit about lately. I think community has always been at the core of who I am. It's one of my core values. It's something that I believe really strongly in. And so even before I felt that sense or that lack of connection and community with other men, I think foundationally it was something that was always at the core of who I was. And so um, I had been married up until about 4 years ago, and throughout that, it was I had had a lot of surface level sort of relationship. And when I say relationship throughout the context of this show today, it's meaning two people. All right. So man, woman, two people, but friendships, that's a relationship, with my wife or partner, that's a relationship. And so these relationships were often very surface level, right? And it not necessarily, I mean, at times it was because I was showing up that way and they were showing up that way. And, but that's who we knew to be,
Mm.
that often, at least from my experience, and that's kind of how I grew up, is that especially as men, you kept anything that you were struggling with, that was going on in your life, things that were hard, like vulnerabilities, things you were ashamed of. Like you didn't talk to nobody about that stuff.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until towards the end of my marriage where I really started getting into therapy for myself to really start discovering. And it started for me really in wanting to be able to show up for both myself and my relationship. And I have two boys as well. Uh, and I wanted to show up in a more authentic, genuine, and present way. Right. And what that kind of meant was that, I was leading a life of people pleasing and
Mm.
giving to get and secrets and just it was, I was afraid to have the conversations that were necessary with anybody, right? Not only my wife, but with friends, with anybody, like, and as a result of that, I felt like at the end of that I was living a life of, I was always carrying around this mask, right? And
Mm.
trying to be whoever anybody wanted me to be in that sort of
Mm.
moment. And so it was through therapy to begin with where I really started to open up and start to explore, what it would look like to be a more authentic version of myself, to have those hard conversations, to face those insecurities of myself. Unfortunately, the marriage didn't work out, and we went our separate ways very constructively, if I can
Mm.
say. But we have a really good relationship now,
Mm.
thankfully. But I went from there and started working with men's groups after we divorced, and it was really into that where I really had my first opportunities to share with other men, and to hear as well that, like, these same sort of things that I'm struggling with, that I struggled with my entire life or through my marriage, they're all struggling with it as well, right? Like, I'm not
Mm.
this special snowflake that I'm the only one in the world with these concerns or these fears or these things that I'm ashamed of. And it just really opened me up to how much men are struggling and suffering in silence, right? And not only, it's not just about that. It's multifaceted because these weren't tools and skills that a lot of us were exhibited or shown to us as we grew up, right? So we're working with like a short set of tools here to begin with, but on top of that, we've also got society that is reflecting back to us that we're less of a man if we're doing these sort of things, right? So it's just being reinforced over and over again, and it's leading to a place where men have fewer like connections and deep connections, strong connections now than they ever have before. So leading kind of along the way to get back to your question, uh, just seeing the profoundness that has had in me and the need in the world for men to not only have a place to share these things, but to learn the skills, right? And
Mm.
to navigate the mindsets around some of these fears that are holding them back from being a more authentic version of themselves and leading themselves and their families. So it led to the Evolved Men Project.
And I love the title, and that's exactly what you've just described. The evolved, evolving. And I can truly believe, yes, growing up, it's not talked about, men. I mean, masculinity has its own examples. And yeah, if you're brought up with, you got to be tough, you can't show your emotions, which a lot of men do have that kind of upbringing. And it's true, you don't see your fathers, they're all tough and you don't see the emotions. And it's so important, especially this day and age. And I'm really I think it's fantastic the work you're doing and getting this out there, because there's a need for it. Absolutely. We all need to understand ourselves. And that's what I love about this. Like you actually said, it's doing the work first on yourself. And I love that. It's fantastic. Yeah.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah. The idea is
mm,
that, there's kind of an archetype or an image of
mm,
our fathers or grandfathers that are these strong, stoic, silent, you know, tough, maybe
mm,
you could say masculine, like, um, and then there's another kind of, and throughout time and evolution, we've also ended up in a different place as well of like almost passive as
mm,
men, right? And so, we don't want to go from the toxic masculinity that a lot of people know, right? And we also don't want to swing to the other side of the spectrum to this passive, people pleasing sort of man. So it's really finding that evolution between the different kind of like archetypes and generations and things like that, because that's not, we can't be emotionless, right?
absolutely.
And we also can't be overwhelmed
Mm,
by emotions as well. So it's really trying to bring those two archetypes and worlds together to really, and the world needs that, right? Our families need that. We need that for ourselves. It's ridiculous to believe that we don't, as men, that we don't have emotions. It just, it doesn't work. It comes out.
absolutely. Yes. And you say it so eloquently compared to what I try to say.
Thank you.
So, when you look at men today, what's the biggest struggle you've seen beneath the surface? Because that's the thing. It is all about beneath the surface. What you see isn't what you see, like you said earlier. It's about putting the mask on to be with whoever you're being with at that moment.
I mean, there's a number of different things, but I think the thing that I continue to come back over and over again is this fear. It's a
Mm,
sense of like shame, and it's a sense of fear, and like a fear of inadequacy, fear of not being enough, because that I think for a lot of people, both in growing up, and this is true in myself as well, that growing up there is, even if it's not, and you've got different ways that it's disseminated. There
mm,
is the father that is very prescriptive and like, hey, this is exactly what it looks like to be a man, and this is what you need to be in order to be a man, and if you're not, then you're less than. But then there's also the images that get interpreted, right, from our fathers or grandfathers or just men as they operated around the world. And as I was saying earlier, social media as well, that are always saying that if you're not this, then
mm.
you're less than, then you're something else. And I think that can be a really, at any point along the way, that if they step outside of that, and even worse than that now, I feel like it has become so, okay, so if we as a man end up exhibiting some of those traits or those qualities from our fathers, right? Like maybe uh, strong, right, and stoic and passive. That can also, they also have a mirror or a reflection that is not always well received, right?
Mm,
And so it's this hair trigger of like, oh, I can't be too strong, but I have to be strong, and
mm,
it's trying to find that balance in it. And so
mm.
it's such a difficult place, I feel like, to be in, that they don't almost know where to go at times.
Yes, absolutely. And I absolutely understand it is a fine line. And the thing is, in it all, what do you want as a man? They're still, trying to please, or they're still trying to think ahead and this is how
Absolutely.
I need to be. If they could just actually relax and be themselves, but then there's the judgment that comes with that. Then there can be perceptions. You need to be like this. It's a minefield, really, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And to your point, I think
Mm,
that that's a question that honestly, and it's, at times I wonder why it took me so long, but most people don't ask themselves that question. Like,
mm,
who do I want to be? We
mm,
have these these pictures or images or labels that come up, and we're just like, well, I want those things, right? I want to have those sort of things, but nobody ever really steps back, like goes all the way back to the foundations of it and says like, who at, a soul level or whatever it is you believe in, like, who do I want to be? Right. And then going from there to start to construct and design their life based on who it is that they want to be. Like, what is it that I need to do as a result to be that person? I think a lot of times we go about it kind of backwards, right? We do the things so that we can have them, or we have the things and we think that I'll be the confident person, right? If I have the fancy car or the
Yes.
job or whatever those sort of things is. But we're not going back to the fundamentals. We're not looking at core values. We're not looking at
Mm,
what's really important to us. And that at the root, and then we start peeling back like, okay, this is who I want to be. And if I start doing the things that I want to do, I have a lot of fear. I have a lot of shame. Okay, well, let's explore those, right? Let's
mm.
navigate that, right? But that's where we have to start.
I really hear you there. I really hear you. Yes. You talk a lot about self-leadership and brotherhood. What does what do those actually mean in practice for the men you work with?
Yeah, definitely. So a lot of times men can have this mentality, right? That is kind of like I was talking about before, that, I'm better off doing this on my own. Nobody has the same sort of struggles that I do. And they self-isolate, right? And it's just this like death spiral. And there's this saying, um, what is it? If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together, sort of thing. And it's really that sort of mentality when it comes to brotherhood, right? You can only grow so far. You can only make so much progress by yourself. And you need the value and the connection and the camaraderie and the trials of a community, right? You need those men to, and that kind of going back to, if we bring it all back around, and it'll happen again and again, is like, if we bring those men back into the picture, our fathers and our grandfathers, to challenge us and to say like, hey man, you're not living up to, what are your values? You're not living up to okay, you haven't identified what they are yet. Okay. And if you have, like, you're not living up to them, right? And we need those people surrounding us, whether it's men or it's friends or whoever it is. I think society in general, we need those people around us to call us forward, right? Not to call us out and point fingers at us and shame us even farther, but to say, hey, you told me that you wanted to be somebody different, right? And I'm here to hold up a mirror and support you in that. And so other having that community and that brotherhood to support somebody coming out of the shadows, right? To shine a light on their fears and their shame and put their arms around each other and be like, hey man, I've got the same things that I'm struggling with, right? I hear you, I feel you, and I'm here with you.
So what does real brotherhood look like, and how is it different from just having friends?
Sure. Yeah. Well, there's, kind of back to what I was saying earlier, that in my childhood and even in my adult ages, that
Mhm.
there's a difference between it. And I tell this story like two friends sitting at a table, and maybe they're there with their families, and they go to soccer games and they do the thing. And the two guys are there, and you got, it's like Bob and Jim, right? And Bob asked Jim, he's like, hey, Bob, how you doing, man? And he's like, I'm doing good. How are you? Oh, I'm doing good. Wife's good. Everybody's good. Yep. Everybody's good. Everybody's fine. Right. But underneath the surface of that, right, maybe any number of things could be going on, right? They're either one of them are struggling in their relationships. They've got things that they're hiding from themselves, their partners, their kids. Like, there's an entire minefield possibly of things that are going on.
Mhm.
And it doesn't have to just be bad, right? But taking that step farther, right, to pull back the layers of the onion, if we were to say, and to really start to dig into who that person is at the soul level. Like, why do they like the things that they do? Why is health important to them again? Like,
Mm.
where do you want to be in 5 or 10 years? But really starting to get to know and understand who the character of that person really is, right? And that's the thing. I mean, throughout this entire when I went through my divorce, throughout the entire thing leading up to it, I never had a single person that stopped and had that conversation, right? It's always just like, oh, it's fine, we're good, um and it wasn't until the very end when I asked what was one of my best friends at the time,
Mm.
and I stopped and I asked him. We were out mountain biking one day, and this was a friend that I'd climbed countless mountains with, right? We'd summited all kinds of things together, been in all kinds of crazy situations. And I asked him one day after mountain biking, I said, hey, what does intimacy, passion, and romance look like for you in your relationship? And it blew his mind. We had never actually, like, we'd done all of these crazy things, but we had never actually stopped and had a conversation like that. And he didn't answer it then. And he came back like a week later and he's like, man, I got to tell you, like, that blew my mind. Like, I have completely like, and he was a very introspective guy kind of looking back, right? But he was like, I went back and I've reassessed what does intimacy, passion, and romance look like for me in my relationship. Right. And it just, regardless of what kind of came of that in our relationship, you know, it was profound to me that we had spent, 5 or 8 years together and we had never crossed that boundary into like, hey, what does life look like for you? Like, how do you see life? How do you see your relationships? And that doesn't mean that I need to like know the intimacies of certain things, but just starting to peel that sort of stuff back, because that's how you make that connection. And that to me is living life.
Having true conversations without any agenda, or you don't feel, you can just be open and honest. And I know us women do it all the time. And men, there's a certain thing that, you just don't talk about. And
Yeah,
it's becoming more and more, yeah, they need to talk about this. Come on, we need to get on. The women have got it so, well, not that we have, don't get me wrong. But at least we talk, sometimes just rubbish, but we do talk a lot. And I think, yeah,
absolutely.
more and more, just having the conversations and having like the courage and having brave conversations, because some of them, just like you said, intimacy. Do we talk about that as men or not? Do we go there? It's the conversations you're having in your own head, really. Just get them out there. Yeah, really, I think that's really brilliant. So when a man does come to you feeling stuck or lost, where do
Yeah.
you start with him?
For me, everything goes back to the core values, right?
Mm.
A lot of my perspective and the way that has been really helpful for me is really, really having that foundation set, like having at least begun to explore it.
Mm.
Um, and then everything leads from that. And a lot of the way that I describe it and have seen it for myself in the past is it's more of a sense of like self leadership.
Mm.
Right. And so starting at the beginning of that, looking at what and I had never explored what my core values were. Right. And it was really interesting because when it happened and when I started really exploring that, I was doing it with another group of men, right? And it was like, okay, we got 20 minutes. Here's a big sheet of values. Everybody, it was kind of how it went, right? And everybody like pick out some values and we'll establish our core values. It took, I mean, it still to this day, am I really refining my core values? Like this is a really important thing because from that, you start to base every action that you take
Mm.
on back to your core values. And it becomes, instead of me having to reassess and evaluate whether or not something is right or feels right or resonates to
Mhm.
me in my life, I just go back to my core values. you know what? I've already done the work. I've already established what these are. Is this me acting in integrity right here? Is this leading my family? Is this building community? Is this having courage,
Mm.
discipline? And if it's not, then I don't do it. If it is, then I move forward. Right. And so for me, everything goes back to those core values and really buying into why it is that those are important to you. Right. Not just pretty names on a piece of paper, but to really, really embody
Yeah.
what those are. And then from there, as I mentioned earlier, going from your core values, right, who it is that you want to be, and then doing those things.
Yes, absolutely. And it's all about who you've been in that situation as well. And like you said, you're embodying it. And I think there's not enough of that goes on. Has there been a moment with a client or in a group where you thought, yes, this is why I do the work I do?
Yeah, absolutely. There was a man a couple of years ago that I worked
Mm,
with that in a group setting that came in. His marriage was in shambles. His wife had asked for a divorce. Like I think they were separated at the time, and he kind of similarly to my own story came in and completely rebooted himself,
mm,
tore everything down to the studs, and over the course of probably 6 months to a year, like along this timeline, things had progressed where they moved back in together. It was this progression of a most beautiful progression to the point of like it couldn't have gotten any worse. They were on the steps of divorce. Right, they had
mm,
separated, they were living separately, to having like the healthiest, thriving marriage and relationship again. And that's still to this day. And that's been
mm.
probably 5 years now, right? Where
Wow.
this man, not only is he, and that's part of this transformation as well, is that it's not just about like, oh, okay, I showed up, I did the work, and now we're back together. Like, let's go back, revert to the old patterns. Like, no,
Yeah.
he came back and did the work, and he's now leading himself in an entirely different way, which makes him a leader in his family, in his community, in his friends. And it's a complete transformation. And those are the sort of things, right? Those are the sort of things that it's like saving a man from whatever that might have been, right? And even at times, you could look at it and be like, oh, even for the men that have divorced, they might say like, oh, it's too late. I'm gonna say like
Mm,
all of this has always happened. Like there's always more that's still yet ahead of us, right? And so you still have to do the work anyways, right? Whether it's now or for a future relationship. And so it's really never too late.
And I think it's like always doing the work, but it's an everyday thing as well because you can relax and you soon end up being back to your old ways. It's keeping it, interesting, keeping it, you want to make that difference. Yeah, absolutely. So, what's the biggest challenge men face when they try to step into vulnerability? Because that's a big thing for men, showing their vulnerability.
Yeah. Well, I think to start with is feeling safe
Mm,
and and practicing it.
mm,
So it has to be in an environment where they feel like they can share these sort of things and not have it used against them, right? Not have it um, pointed out, not have it laughed at, sort of
mm,
thing. And this sort of stuff goes like not just for men that are in groups with other men, but just being vulnerable in general, right? Like this
mm.
is I look at it sometimes, we've all got different parts of ourself.
Yeah.
And a lot of times that part that's coming out at those vulnerable sort of times, right? And it could be having a hard conversation. It could be just asking another man like, "Hey man, you seem really cool. I want to hang out sometime." Right? That's a moment there where somebody's putting themselves out there. Like they're for better or worse, like that 5-year-old kid's putting his neck out on the line right there. It's going back to that elementary days of do you like me or do you not? And so It's
Mm,
yeah, it's creating a space for yourself and for other people that is it's safe for people to do that. And just kind of knowing that everybody out there is having these same sort of thoughts and these same sort of struggles, and everybody is dying for somebody to go first. Everybody is
mm.
looking for somebody to be the one. We're all having the same thoughts.
Absolutely. And I love the fact you said they're all waiting for someone else to go first because it's having that fear. And then when someone does, then that does create the space because it is about having that space, that safe space. Absolutely. Yeah. So, how has fatherhood shaped your views of leadership?
Oh, man. I fatherhood is like the ultimate crucible. I feel like, it's it and it continues time and time again. Just when you think you've got one phase or pattern
Mm,
understood, and that it morphs into something else. And so I'm so grateful for the opportunity to be a father, because it not only for myself but for my kids. I mean, a lot of this journey for myself is, if I look back at the beginning of it, is seeing the same tendencies
mm,
and patterns of myself starting to show up in my kids, right? And there's no better, for me, there's no better motivator than to have that thought and that kind of forward thinking, that if I don't start to handle this, right, not just like handle this, but like, if I don't start to do this work, it's going to repeat and be exactly the same sort of thing
mm,
that I likely struggled with at different times. And for me, that was a huge shift to for me to think that my kids are going to struggle with something that I've known my entire life about for myself. And then I've watched it develop for them over the course of their entire lives. Right. And so putting myself in that place, 10, 20, 30 years down the road, where I
mm.
knew all along what was going into this, it
Yeah.
was that's one of the things that continues to get me up and doing this work on myself every day, to not only lead myself, right, to continue to grow and expand and lead my family and my community, but for them, as if nothing else, like a statue and an image of at least a good direction. And I don't want to say that, like, hey, this is exactly what you should be, but I at least want to embody, as we go back, as we talk about courage and discipline and some of these core
Mm,
values, like you figure out who you are, but I'm going to at least embody these sort of traits that I believe to be helpful. So fatherhood has been a cornerstone of who I am, and I don't know that I would be the same person today
mm.
without it. So
Yeah, that's beautiful, actually. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Yeah.
yeah.
And I think that nicely goes on to my next question because it's, breaking generational cycles in fatherhood and leadership. Because, like you were saying, you're being the example you want to be, showing your children how they could possibly be as well, and without reverting back to old patterns. Because what's your perception on breaking generational cycles in fatherhood and leadership?
Yeah. Well, to exactly that point, I think
Mm,
it's so important that
mm,
it's almost like a rubber stamp, if
mm,
or an input and an output. If we just keep putting the same thing in, we're going to keep getting the same thing out on the other end.
mm,
And so somebody at some point along the way has to be the one to
mm.
recognize these patterns and start to turn the ship, and sometimes I kind of describe that as, and ships don't turn fast, right? If you've got a giant cruise ship that you're on,
Yeah.
it's not like a speedboat, that it could take generations for these dynamics to start to shift, right, from one direction to another. And so somebody has to be the one to if nothing else, start asking these questions of themselves, maybe doing the work and start asking these same questions in a safe group of other men or in community or whatever it is, but to start asking the questions and start showing up and start doing the work to be that example of what it should be. And often I talk a lot about in my community this sense of mentorship and elderhood and things like that, that the need to have people that are breaking these patterns and they're able to show that in a way to the future generations, right? And to even say of like, hey, how is it they got to that place, right? It's one thing, I think, to explain to people like, hey, don't do this, but it's an entirely different thing to actually explain to them like, hey, this is what was happening for me as I realized this. This is the realization that I had and the impact that it was having on me and my family and any of that sort of stuff, myself, and the negative impacts. And here's what I did as a result of it. And I tell you what, I failed time and time again along the way, right? Probably more often than I succeeded. But I'm here today and to share that with you.
And that's brilliant because it's having that open conversation and seeing the shifts as well. Absolutely. Yes. Because you are the host of the Evolved Men's podcast. Tell me more about that.
Yeah. So it's a podcast to not only represent the community, but to go out and find other people that are exploring this new sense of what masculinity could look like, right? Through different ways. And so looking for answers to some of the questions that men have and that men are asking. So being that focal point where men can come to for information. So trying my best to find people not only answer questions that I'm having for myself, right? Of, discipline and courage and self-respect and core values and health and relationships and emotions, just all of it. But being a place for men to come to one place to not only have resources, right, to listen in on some of that sort of stuff, but to also have the community to reflect, right, on what it is that they're hearing.
Yeah, and just share. I think like sharing is a big part of how we can get involved. Absolutely, yes. So, what is one of the most important lessons you've learned over your life so far?
Oh man, I've got a list here of all of my important lessons. I think the thing that I come back to time and time again, and even as early as today, is for me is really around presence. And taking the time to slow down enough to acknowledge more moments. And for me, that creates the space to acknowledge how it is that I'm responding to situations, right? Situations for myself and alone day to day, but situations, how I'm responding to my kids, how I'm responding to my partner, how I'm responding to people that cut me off on the freeway. Right. And from there, from having that presence and I'm creating that space, I can start to explore a little bit deeper, where it is that comes from. So
that's brilliant. Yeah. And it's the old classic, yeah, getting cut up in the driving and things like that. Yeah. And it's who you're being in, even in that moment. Everything makes a difference. Just because you're on your own in the car doesn't mean you need to behave a certain way. So yeah, it's actually embodying, like we said earlier, embodying who you are.
Yeah.
So if there was one key takeaway you want every listener to walk away with today, what would that be?
I think one of the things that has been most, besides presence, that has been most transformative for me is really from my mentor, being on your own side, right? And to really um, acknowledging and working on and developing the relationship with yourself, right? And that is really getting intimate and personal with how that dialogue goes and those conversations go and everything around that. Because from that, you can, if you really pull on that thread and you dig into it, you can really start to explore where those different parts of ourselves come from and what that looks like. And from there, right, once you start building that better relationship, you're more able to, step into uncomfortable situations and start having, some of these courageous moments and hard conversations, and maybe stepping into a place, right, of community, and to start to share and start to be vulnerable. But all of it starts with the self internally,
Mm,
right? And your own thoughts and the conversations that you have with yourself.
couldn't agree more.
I think the only thing I would say is that, just for men to get out there, to have the conversations, to be vulnerable, that, as we said earlier, that everybody is looking for someone to lead, for somebody to go first. And we're all struggling with the same stuff. We're all dealing with the same day-to-day sort of things. So reach out to a friend and be the one to take the initiative today.
That's beautiful. Yes. So where can the listeners find you online, your podcast? What's your website, Corby?
Yeah. So the podcast is Evolved Men Podcast. And the website is really the best place for everything. And that's the evolvementproject.com. And at the website, you find on there, I've got the Circle, which is a free community for men to connect with me and other men that are doing the work, and to just start to dive into it. So it's a free resource just to dive into it.
Please do go ahead and take a look at that. And even if you feel it's not for you, you might know somebody that you can pass it on to. So that's a good resource.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Anita. This has been great.
My pleasure. So thank you for sharing your insightful wisdom and knowledge with us today. And by doing so, I know you have helped so many others and made a big difference. I'd really like to acknowledge you for that, Corey Baum.
Sounds good. Thanks, Anita.
My pleasure. So we are all about Create the Courage to Be Fearless podcast here. What is your definition of courage?
I love courage. Courage is actually one of my core values. I think it's courage is doing, and I didn't necessarily have it typed out ready for this, but for me, I think courage is often acknowledging or recognizing the fear, but doing it anyways, sort of thing. So it's not this like big bold leader with a sharp axe, right, and a heavy hammer. It's like, yeah, I'm afraid, I'm terrified, and it's still there, but I'm gonna step into this, maybe slowly at first, but I'm still gonna take 1% move forward.